So, welcome to Zero to CCNA course. My name is Arpit Pandit, and I will be your instructor for this course. And in today's session, we are just going to introduce the structure of the course, how exactly we are going to proceed, what can you expect from this particular course, and what is the curriculum of CCNA, what topics are we going to cover, how exactly are we going to cover them. So, one thing you will notice in this presentation is that this a complete course is completely hands-on. So we have a lot of labs and practicals that we are going to do to understand the technology. And how exactly are we going to do that? Like which software are we going to use to use for routers and switches practice and the configuration, and how the labs will be given to you every week, and how can you set it up everything so that you can start practicing as well. So without further ado, let's get started and let's introduce the Zero to CCNA. So first of all, let's talk about this course structure. What exactly are we going to cover, how we are going to cover it, and what can you expect every week in this course. So the structure of this course is we are going to go through every section every week, once a week, and the session will be 2 hours, 2 hours per session. Although I always say this, that this course is not time driven, it's a topic driven course or content driven course. So sometimes we are going to cover a topic which may go slightly more than 2 hours as well, and sometimes it may be less than 2 hours, depends on the topic of the day, right? So it's just a rough guideline that this is how long we're going to have every session. Now in this session, we are going to go through in-depth theory. So whenever we start a new topic, we are going to make sure that you understand exactly what that topic is and why do we need that topic and how to configure it. So I always structure the topics in these three questions: what, why, and how. Because let's say if you already know about it a little bit, then you will actually bridge the gaps that you have. But if you're completely new and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, then it will be a great starting point for you. For example, if I say STP, a spanning tree protocol, and you say, okay, absolutely have no idea what is spanning tree protocol. So don't worry, because that's exactly how we are going to cover it right from the scratch. So we'll start with what is STP. It's a protocol which prevents loops. So the second question comes is why do we need STP? And we are going to understand why looping is such a bad thing in networking, and how we can actually have big issues if our network has a lot of loops. Network becomes slow, sometimes completely unresponsive. So how exactly we can get rid of the loops? We use a protocol called Serenity protocol. So once the what and why is clear, then we will come to the bigger part, which is how do you configure STP? How do you actually check it? How do you troubleshoot it? And then it will make more sense, and you'll be more interested into it because now you know that what exactly this technology is and what problem is it solving in the networking world. So the same structure we are going to follow for everything that we are going to cover, every topic that we are going to cover in this CCNA course. Switching topics, routing topics, and then later we are going to configure infrastructure services and security configuration. So we are going to make sure that we use the same logic to understand any theory or any fundamental concepts. Because one thing is very important to understand right from the beginning is that theory or the fundamentals are extremely important before you can get your hands dirty with the configuration, right? Because if I directly start with the configuration, you will lose interest very fast. It's just the commands and it is just a matter of practice. So whether you'll remember them or not, it depends on how much practice you do, right? It's not a big deal. What is a big deal is that why am I typing this command? What is the impact of this? What exactly is this technology doing? And what exactly this command is doing under within this particular technology? So when I say routing and switching, we'll start from the scratch that what exactly switching means, what routing means, and then we'll see which kind of problems they are solving. And then, of course, after the in-depth theory, we will definitely get to the practicals because it's a completely hands-on approach or hands-on based program. So we will have multiple practical labs where whatever we are talking about in the theory session, we are going to back it up with the configuration and the practical presentation of what we do there, right? So for example, if I'm talking about a routing protocol called Open Shortest Path First or OSPF routing protocol, and I'm explaining you exactly what is OSPF, why do we need it, and then how do we configure it. So we go in depth theory understanding, the fundamental understanding of the OSPF concepts in the first hour of the session, and then immediately after that, in the second hour of the session, we are going to configure OSPF in a network, in a topology, and we'll see this in action. Whatever the points we talked about, we'll see them in action immediately within the same live Zoom session. So that actually solidifies your understanding of the topic. So we start with the theory, you understand the logic, and then you see that logic implemented and see it live, how it is actually affecting the configuration and how it is affecting your network. So that is extremely important to understand things on a deeper level, which is called the applied concept, right? So you understand something and then you apply it. So it becomes clearer what exactly we are talking about or what topic we are covering. So you will see that for labs, we have different PDFs created, and these PDF files will have the instructions or the questions that you need to configure on a topology. The topology will include routers and switches, and you need to configure these instructions into the PDF lab on that topology, right? So just to give you an example, let's say the topic of the day is a spanning tree protocol. So we will have a topology, something like this, where we will have multiple routers and switches, and we have, you can see different branches, branch 1, branch 2, branch 3, and every branch has some routers, switches, and computers. So ultimately what we are doing is we are providing connectivity to the end devices so that they can communicate to each other, right? So what exactly do we mean by VLANs? How do we configure them? How do they affect the communication? What is the configuration of trunking? So all these things, whatever the technical words I'm using here, I'm going to explain them in detail. And of course, that will be backed up with the configuration, right? So when it comes to configuring anything, we are going to use this topology, which you see. And depending on the topic, we are going to create some boundaries in this topology. For example, if you are talking about OSPF routing protocol, we have different areas, logical areas into the OSPF. So the topology will look something like this. It is the same topology, I showed you earlier. But now you can see there are bifurcations here. Branch 1 is OSPF area 1, branch 2 is OSPF area 2, branch 3 is OSPF area 3, and the middle part, the internet part, is the OSPF area 0. So then you will see, okay, we need the same topology, but a little different diagram to understand the boundaries of each area. So every week, I'm going to send you the lab, which will you need to configure on this topology. So just to give you an example of a lab, we will, for example, if today's topic is parental protocol. So I'm going to send you a PDF with the instructions that you need to configure parental protocol according to these instructions. Configure host names on the devices, configure different VLANs. Like on switch 1, 2, and 3, we have to configure 3 VLANs. Switch 4 and 5, we have to configure these VLANs, research and marketing. Again, don't worry about how do I configure VLAN. I don't know what is VLAN. That's the point here. We are going to cover everything in detail. If you don't know any of these keywords or the meaning behind them, don't worry at all. That's the point of this class, right? And we are going to cover everything. What I want to what I want you to pay attention on is that there will be a structured lab like this every week, where there will be different points you need to configure in an orderly fashion. And once it is done, your configuration is done, you will have a much better understanding that how exactly things work uh, for that particular topic of the day. And of course, uh, in the live class, I'm going to explain you what STP is, for example, and then I'm going to do the same lab that you see right now in front of you on live environment, like in a topology with the routers and switches. And of course, I'm not going to configure the lab quietly. I'm going to explain you every single point again. So in the theory part, we already understood what STP is, how does it work and everything. But then when it comes to the configuration, I'm going to configure it in front of you. And I'm also going to explain you why we are doing the things we are doing and the way we are doing it, right? So that it becomes clearer how exactly this is done. But of course, after this, when you are doing it in your off time during the week, because after the class, I'll send you the same PDF with the lab, so you can also practice it during the week. So when you are doing it, you are not alone, because I'm going to send you the solution file as well. So there will be a solution file which will have exactly the answers for every question. Like point number 4, you have to create 3 VLANs. This is how exactly you need to create the VLANs. Or point number 5, we have to create these VLANs on other switches. That's the way we create. Or trunking, that's how we configure it. So there will be solution as well, or a solution file will also be. The reason I'm sending you the solution file also is because you need to understand that throughout the duration of this course, you should have the mindset of learning, not the mindset of testing yourself, because you will be testing yourself when you go for the exam anyway. Uh, this course is not to test yourself. This course is to learn. So when you learn something new within the Zoom session, of course, that time it is natural that you will be in your learning mode, because you will be learning new things from me and seeing me doing the practical, you will understand it. But when I send you the lab for doing it in the off time during the week, it's not to test your knowledge, or it is not to it is not to test how much you remember from the live class. That's not the point. The point is that whatever you learn into the class and you saw me doing it, which solidified the understanding more. Now we want to solidify it further. We want to make sure that it becomes very natural for you, that particular topic and the practical. That's why you have to do the lab again as many times you want to do during that off time into the week. So because you are still learning that time, don't worry if you don't remember the commands or you forget a particular concept. For the concept, you can go back to the recording of the session, which will be available to you. And for the specific command, you can come to the solution file. And I would recommend to watch the recording as many times as you want, and look the solution file, or come back to the solution file as many times as you want, because you are still learning. So that if you get stuck somewhere and you come and check the solution, your brain will remember, okay, that's where I got stuck and I got the answer immediately, so now I remember how exactly it needs to be done, right? So that is the structure we are going to follow for this class. So multiple practical labs will be there, and a lab PDF will be sent after the session, and the lab solution file will also be sent along with the lab. So you can see that we are using a completely hands-on approach here. Now you must be thinking right now, okay, for the theory part, we are going to join the Zoom session, and then you will send us the lab. You will solve the lab within the Zoom session, but then you will also send us the lab to do it in during the week in the off time. So how are we going to do the lab? Like, do we need to purchase routers and switches to do this lab, or is there a software that we use? So you must have received an email from me already with the instructor note email, right? Zero to CCNA, welcome to Zero to CCNA instructor notes, where I actually shared a Dropbox link with you guys that has the OVA file. Now, what is this OVA file? So we are actually going to use a simulator which is called EVE-NG, and this simulator, EVE-NG, Emulated Virtual Environment Next Generation, is a free software available on internet. EVENG.net is the website, which allows you to emulate the routers and switches. Now, emulation is different from simulation. In simulation, what happens? You create a software which mimics the actual device. So it's not the actual device, it is just mimicking the actual device. So it doesn't support all the commands that you would get in the real router or switch. But if you're using an emulator like EVNG, then you are just using a front end as a software, but in the back end, you are using the real operating systems of routers and switches. The same operating system image that you would have in a real router or switch, you are actually using here as well. So you get the complete set of commands that you would get in the real router or switch, as if you're using the real router and switch. The only thing missing is the hardware. You are just using a software in the front end to access the operating system of these devices. That's why it is very powerful. And in our classes, in CCNP also, all the way to CCI also, we use EVNG because it supports all the commands that you need for your practicals, right? So EVNG is an emulator which we use. But what is this OVA file that I sent you? So basically, what happens is EVNG is a software which is created on Linux. It's a Linux-based operating system, and if you want to start using routers and switches, there are many steps involved. You need to somehow procure the operating system images for correct routers and switches from somewhere on the internet. And once you have these images, then you need to somehow copy them to the Linux operating system of EVNG. And then you need to know some Linux commands also so that you can license these images. Without licensing, these images will not boot up. So you need to do some licensing procedure. Once you are done with all these things, then you can open a browser and connect to the EVNG Linux system and start creating the topologies like this topology I just showed you, where you can connect different routers and switches to each other. But then you'll have to think, okay, how many routers do I need? How many switches do I need? How many computers do I need to be able to practice all the topics which are there in the CCNA exam? So you can see there are so many steps involved before you can start practicing, before you can get to the real content of CCNA. So we wanted to make sure that you don't need to do any of these things, right? You can directly get to the configuration and the important topics that you need for your CCNA certification. So that's why I created this that's why I created this pre-compiled image called .ova file, which includes everything that you need. Means it includes the EVNG software, which is already copied with all the routers and switches images that you would need. These images and images of routers and switches are already licensed. And when you open the EVNG in the browser to start using routers and switches, you would see that the topologies are pre-created or pre-configured, so that you don't need to think how do I connect everything to start practicing CCNA. So right from the day one, you will have a completely working setup that you can use to start accessing routers and switches and start configuring them according to your requirement or the particular topic of the week. And you don't need to worry about setting up everything at all, because we wanted to make sure we get rid of these issues for you right away. And of course, my support is always there. So if you have faced any issue with the setup of EVNG or accessing the devices, you can get in touch with me and we can get you up and running with in no time, right? So EVNG is an OVA that I sent you. So how do you use this OVA? What software do you use to start using it? So you use VMware Workstation. So VMware is actually a hypervisor which allows you to run virtual machines on your Windows system. So you don't need to install EVNG on a bare metal system. You can have your Windows operating system running. You just need to install VMware Workstation Player, which is a free software. And again, if you have any issues in installing VMware Workstation Player or procuring the image for VMware Workstation, let me know. I can send you a link to download the software from our repository as well. Because recently what happened is that Broadcom has purchased VMware. So the website is a mess right now. It's very difficult to find where exactly you can go and download the Workstation Player. So if you have any issues, you can let me know. But that will be the first step. You need to install the VMware Workstation Player. And when you install it, it will actually look something like this. Once it is installed, you will see something like this. It is the VMware Workstation Player. Like I'm using 17. There might be a newer version, but it doesn't matter which version you are using. As long as it is the VMware Workstation software, that will be good enough for our OVA that I sent. So the OVA file that I sent you, you need to import it into VMware. So you need to go to the player file, and then you need to open the OVA from here. When you click on open, or you can also press Ctrl plus O to open this dialog. And then here, you need to go to the proper location. And for example, in 0 to CCNA, you will see there are EVNG files. So this is the file I was talking about, 0 to CCNA OVA file. You need to import this. You click on open. And once it is imported, it will actually show up something like this, right? And when you click on it and you start it, it will boot it to something like this. Let me show. I already booted it. So after the EVNG boots, after you import the OVA in VMware, you boot it, you will come to this particular screen. Now, depending on depending on different operating systems or different computers, you might end up with a different IP address here. But this is where you will end up. So even if you remember, I told you it is the Linux operating system actually. That's why it is asking you to log in here, because it has the uh, uh, it is the Linux operating system in the backend Ubuntu. So you need to log in here to start accessing the Linux, to copy the router and switch images and license them. But as I mentioned, I have already done that for you. So you don't need to log in here at all. What you do need to do here is just boot it like it is booted. And when it comes to this screen where it is asking you to log in, just note down the IP address here. You see there is an IP address here in this second line. Use HTTP 192.168.79.130. Now, in your case, this IP could be a different IP address, but you will see some IP here that you need to open into a browser. So you don't need to log in here. You just note down this IP, you minimize it, and you just open this IP address into a browser. So you can open the browser here, and the IP that we saw there. So when you open that IP address, it will bring you to this browser, this application of EVNG, where you can log in with the username admin and password EVE. By the way, we do have one of the video in the first week about how to set up EVNG, how to import OVA, how to access it. So it's the same thing, same information you can see into the first week video recordings as well on the zero2it.com or the My Kajabi portal, where you access your pre-recorded or the recorded sessions from this class, right? So admin and Eve is the password, EVE. You sign in, and when you sign in, you actually get to this screen where you will see all the topologies like 0 to CCNA, 0 to CCNA, BGP, DHCP, IPv6, OSPF, routing, and all these, right? You see some extra also because I was playing around and creating some more things. But in your case, you will see the 0 to CCNA topologies. So when you click on one of the topology like 0 to CCNA.unl, on the right hand side, you will see an option to open this topology, this open button, right? If you're using a smaller screen, you might have to scroll down to see this open button, but you click on it and then it opens the topology which I was showing you earlier, right? Branch 1, branch 2, branch 3, multiple routers and switches. So here you can actually start them and access them by going on the left hand side options window here, right? So you see that there is an option window on the left hand side. If you go to the more actions, you have the option to start all nodes. So you go on the left hand side, more actions, start all nodes. Generally, it's always a best practice to wipe all nodes before you start them. What is wiping nodes means? Wiping all nodes means if you had done any configuration in the last lab which you saved, then it will be removed and the topology will go back to the base configuration so that you can start a new lab. So anytime you're starting a new lab, it's always a good idea to wipe all nodes, say yes, and then start them so that they start from the base configuration. Anything you configured in the last lab will be removed so that you can practice again, right? Or you can practice a new lab basically. So the link that I sent you in the email for the OVA, you will see that it also downloads one more file which is called the EVNG Windows Client Pack. When you install the Windows Client Pack, that will allow you to click on the device to start using it. So let me zoom in. Let's say if I want to open router 1, I can just click on it and there will be a pop-up here which will ask me, do you want to open this? You can say yes, and putty session will be open like this, and I can start accessing the device, right? So the question is that how do you have this? Like sometimes what happens, you already have it. Like you can start the devices and then you can click on one of the device, and when you click OK, it should open the putty section of the device. In case if it's not happening, make sure that the EVNG Windows Client Pack is installed, which is also sent along with the OVA file. And once that is installed, you can actually go to the C drive on your system, whatever Windows system you're using, go to the C drive, program files, and here you will see an evng folder will be created if you have installed the Windows client pack also, right? So let me show you first the client pack. So if I go to our CCNA folder and the evng files, you can see that there will be an evng Windows client pack. This file will also be there. When you install this file, so this is the OVA, right? 0 to CCNA. That's what you will import into the VMware. And that's the Linux machine where we see the IP address and open it into the browser and all these things. But to be able to click on the device to open the putty session, you need to install this one, which is a very small software, only 61 MB. And once you install it, then in the C drive, under program files, you will be able to see the evng folder. Under this folder, all you need to do is look for the registry files here. You can see these are the registry files. And look for the file which ends with the keyword putty. So Windows 10 64-bit putty. It doesn't matter whether you're using Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows 10, or Windows 11. The name is Windows 10, but it will work in all variations, all versions of Windows. You just need to double click on it and install this into your registry. So I have already installed it, so I'll skip it. But you just click OK. And once you are done with that, then you will be able to click on the device and open it directly into the putty. Very straightforward, right? So that's how you will access the devices. And that's how we are going to do our practicals, as I was mentioning earlier. So you can see you have everything here. You have the in-depth theory so that you know exactly the topic very well, and then you will see me configuring it within the live Zoom session, so you know exactly how it is configured as well. And then I'll send you the same lab along with same PDF along with the solution file, so that the same lab and solution file will be with you. You can practice it as many times as you want. And where would you practice it? I have sent you the OVA file that you need to import in VMware, so that you have a working topology where you can practice as much as you want and whenever you want, right? That's why we call it a fully hands-on approach. And of course, the cherry on top is that the recordings will be available to you for lifetime. So lifetime access to our CCNA class recording. Now, the recording might be from one of the earlier classes, but it is the same CCNA class. It's just that in every CCNA class, we go through the same topics. So we don't keep multiple recordings. But let's say if I'm covering OSPF, and if you go back and watch the recording, you will see all the same information there as well. So it's not that it's something different, right? So recordings will be available, but the benefit of having a lifetime access is that in case if there is something new added to the CCNA course by Cisco, then we are going to also create recordings for those new topics, and they will be added to the portal, and they will be available to you also, even if you had purchased course like 4 years ago. It doesn't matter. So there is no time limit for access to the updated recording, because we know life happens. Sometime you're preparing and then you get stuck into your some other important work, and you have to take a break for 6 months. You come back, you see there are a few new things in CCNA and you want to start again. Don't worry, we will cover everything into the recordings and you will have access for the lifetime. And another cherry on the top is, of course, anytime you have any issue with the setting up your labs or accessing the files, or technical issues like you want to understand in more detail what exactly a particular command means in OSPF, or I didn't understand that particular part or this particular part, can you explain again, or can you detail it this part more? So we will have Q&A sections also. So in every class, we will have a short Q&A section at the end of the class. But of course, during the week when you are doing it and you face some issues and you want to ask questions, we have a very good Facebook community. So the welcome email that Christian sent you, it also has a link to join the Facebook community or Facebook group, where we have all our existing and the access students also. So you can ask questions there, and there you can ask very detailed questions also. Like you can take screenshots of the configuration and paste it there, ask your detailed questions, and I will be answering those questions there. And there would be other students there. So maybe they are already on the CCNP level or CCI level, even they can also chip in. Or maybe they are also on the CCNA level and they can benefit from your question, because they will see and they will see my answer, and that will be a great solution as well for them. So that's a great place to ask detailed questions, and we answer typically very fast, so you will get your answer as soon as possible. In case if there's a remote chance that you don't use Facebook at all, don't worry. When you are watching the recording on our portal, you will see that in below every recording also we have a comment section where you can write down your detailed question, and that also comes directly to me, and I will be answering you as soon as possible. We don't encourage you to send emails with the technical questions. So if you have any difficulty in accessing the system or with VMware or OVA, you can definitely send an email. But for technical questions, we recommend a Facebook group or the comment section of the recording, because we streamlined everything there, and we have a repository of the solutions there as well, which help everyone, right? So that would be the recommended method to ask questions. So having said that, what exactly are we going to cover in this course? So of course, we are going to start with the basics of networking. So what exactly networking is? So if you're completely new, don't worry, we got you covered. We will make sure that you understand what exactly the concept of networking, which is called enabling communication. We will see some uh, real life examples as well. And then the bread and butter of networking, IP addressing and subnetting. This is one of the most important topics of CCNA, because you will see that if you want to communicate with someone, if you want to send some information, like you're writing a letter to someone, or if you're sending a package to someone, what do you need? The first thing you need is their address, right? If you don't have the address, how can you send something to them? Same thing happens if you want to send a IP packet to another device. You need the address, and that is the IPv4 addressing that we are going to learn in detail. And subnetting is one of the topic which is going to be very, very important for your networking journey all the way up to CCI level, because even if you go to for the expert level, all the topologies and diagrams, they use subnetting. Subnetting is basically creating a smaller group of devices by breaking a bigger group. So if you have 100 devices in a same network, you can break it into smaller networks, which we call subnets. So we are going to learn in detail how subnetting work as well. Then we'll come to the switching part. So the switching basically means communication within a network. So you don't go out of the network. You are communicating within the network. So we'll understand the concepts of VLANs, VTP, Ether channel, and spanning tree protocol, or STP. Don't worry if you don't know anything about these things, because we are going to start from scratch, and we'll understand the switching um, in depth enough for a CCNA plus level, I would say, a little bit more than you need for the CCNA level. Then we'll come to the routing. So we'll understand the router basic configuration and how do you access the router securely using something called secure shell. Then we'll understand the concept of routing, static and default routing. Routing is basically enabling communication between different networks. So as long as you are staying within one network, it's called switching. But of course, sometimes you have to go out of your network to some other network. Maybe you have multiple departments in your company, IT, sales, HR, research, and you want to keep them into separate networks. So how do you enable communication between these different networks? That is called routing. So we will understand routing and how do we do it manually, which is called static, or a default direction, like for everything unknown, go to the internet. That is default routing. Or we can also understand some routing protocols like OSPF. So in CCNA, you no longer have RIP or EIGRP, which used to be there earlier. So we only have OSPF as the dynamic routing protocol. And OSPF version 2 basically means it is the version for IP version 4, not IP version 6, right? So IPv4 routing protocol. But we are going to understand IPv6 addressing as well, and the routing protocols configured on IPv6. We are going to check that as well. So static routing is basically manually putting the information that how many networks are there and how to reach them, right? Dynamic routing like OSPF simply means that delegating this work to a protocol, which will dynamically find out how many networks you have and how to reach them, what is the shortest path to reach every possible network. That will be dynamic routing. So we will understand how to configure it, and then we will see the practical as well for that. IPv6 addressing is the new addressing, which is much bigger than IPv4. Like in IPv4, you have around 4.3 billion addresses, which are apparently not enough now. So IPv6 was created, which has 300 trillion, 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 3 times trillion addresses. So it's supposed to be more than enough for any foreseeable future. So once your switching is done, that means your net within the same network, everything is working fine. Everyone can communicate to each other. Then your routing is okay. That means you have multiple networks, multiple departments, and all can communicate without any problem. That means your infrastructure is working. When your switching works, when your routing works, that means your infrastructure is working fine. Now, after that, you want some services, of course, because why are you configuring networking? You want to provide some services. So then we can see some IP services which can be configured on the devices. And we'll see that these services need the routing and switching to be already configured. Then only they can work. And every one of these services actually they solve a different problem. Like NTP here, you see the name Network Time Protocol, just to make sure that we have the same time information synchronized on all the devices. Like in old movies, if two people have to meet somewhere else, they will synchronize their clocks that we will meet at 4 p.m. at that place. Let's make sure that our clocks are matching. That's same thing for the devices. That's called NTP or DNS, domain naming system. Have you ever wondered that when you open a browser to go to your website, like go to your email, gmail.com, or if you want to open facebook.com or twitter.com, or now it is called x.com. Basically, these all are the names, friendly names that we can remember, but the networking works on IP addresses. So someone has to change that name or translate that name, google.com, to some IP address of a server where you have the web page that you are trying to look, right? Trying to access. So that's what DNS does. DNS translates IP addresses, friendly IP addresses, into not so friendly IP addresses. These are numbers, right? So it becomes easier to just remember names. That's what DNS does. So similarly, you have so many different services we will talk about in detail and how exactly they solve a particular issue, right? And whenever you have a network infrastructure, you need to also make sure that it is properly secured. So we will talk about some security features also, like access control list, so that you can control who can communicate with whom, what services can communicate with what other services, and what services cannot communicate with other services. So you can control that by configuring some security features on both switching level and also on the routing level. We'll understand some wireless basics also, because wireless is part of Cisco. Although you won't have any practical or any lab into the exam for wireless, so they just want you to have the basics understanding. As a matter of fact, there are a few topics like virtualization or automation and programmability. These few topics they don't ask, or they don't expect you to configure them, because that is something for the professional or expert level. But you should be able to understand the logic and how exactly these things work. So because it's a completely hands-on live program, so all the topics that needs a lab and the configuration we are going to cover here. But don't worry, after the live sessions are finished, we will open a series of recorded sessions where you can understand the concepts of wireless, virtualization, automation, and programmability, and few other topics like this, where you just need the theoretical knowledge for the CCNA exam. You don't need to do any lab, or you will not see any simulation in the exam for these topics. But of course, for even for these topics, the Q&A support is still there, so you can ask questions anytime, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions. But yes, apart from that, we have more than 20 labs that we are going to do for all the important topics which might be there in the practical form as well in the exam, which we call simulation in the exam. So speaking of exam, what exactly is the CCNA exam? So CCNA exam has a code 200-301. This is the latest code they are using. So it's a 120 minutes exam. So you get 2 hours. If you are a non-native English speaking from a non-native English speaking country, then you get 30 more minutes. So 150 minutes you will get. But if you are a native English speaker, you will get 120 minutes, which is also more than sufficient, because you get most of the questions are theoretical questions, means MCQs, multiple choice questions, drag and drop questions, tables matching questions, and then there could be few simulations. Simulation means they will show you a topology, they will tell you a problem or a question, and then you need to click on the router or a switch, and a terminal will open, and you need to configure, or you need to use some show commands to troubleshoot or to configure devices according to the requirement of the question. That's where our course will help you a lot, because we have so many labs that we are going to do in our course that it will become very natural to you. You will be very comfortable in configuring devices. It will become a second nature. So simulations, which is the hardest part of the exam, will become the easiest for you, right? Also remember, this is a weighted exam. Means some questions have more weight, more points comparing to other questions. So if you think, okay, I will skip, there are like 4 or 5 simulations in the exam out of 60 questions. I'll skip these 4. I don't want to configure anything. I'll just do the remaining 56 theoretical questions. Well, you are going to fail the exam if you do that, because the simulated questions, they have more weight, they have much more scoring than comparing to the theoretical questions. So of course, the theoretical questions are also important. You can't skip them, but simulations, without configuring simulations, you can't expect to pass the exam. That's why this hands-on approach is extremely important, right? And you will have 50 to 60 questions in the exam according to the use case, right? Now, the VMware that or the EVNG I was talking about earlier. So we use EVNG on VMware, and topology is already set in EVNG, and the OVA file is already sent to you guys. So this is something we already discussed. How much RAM should you assign to this VM? So I would recommend to give it at least 8 gig of RAM. So that means you need to have a PC with more than 8 gig of RAM, because you need to give 8 gig to this EVNG. In case if you don't have a PC with more than 8 gig, like if you have a laptop or desktop with only 8 gig of RAM, then give only 4 gig to the uh, EVNG, to the VM that we are using, right? So whenever you go to the VM, when you import it, let's take an example. Let's say if you import a particular VM, and then you go to the virtual machine setting for that VM, you will see that in the settings you can select how much RAM you want to give it. So you can adjust it, make it 4 gig if you think you don't have enough. Otherwise, you can leave it to 8 gig. And make sure that the network adapter, the first one, is set to NAT, which it should be set to NAT by default. So that when you boot the system, you will be able to see the IP address I was discussing earlier. You will see an IP like this, right, when it boots up, so that you can open this in the browser. So that's what you should do. Make sure that you have at least 8 gig of RAM. So you will see the memory and the network adapter. These two things you should be careful about when you are setting it up. So just to wrap it up today, because it was just the introduction section, how this program can help you, as we have already discussed, that all the important theory is covered. So you don't need to worry about going anywhere else or reading any other books, because we will go in depth on all the important concepts. Multiple labs to start practicing right from day one. And this is actually a 24 weeks course. So actually, it's a 20 weeks course, but just assuming that there might be a cancellation somewhere, or we may need a little bit more time to explain some topics. Like especially if you want a little bit more time, if you are completely new, we can start slightly slower initially and make sure that the basics of networking is clear. So assuming that we actually take some time. So it's not like a boot camp course you see many other places. Like it's a 5-day CCNA, 8 hours every day, lots and lots of topics every single day, and you don't get enough time to grasp it. You don't get enough time to practice it, and at the end of the 5 days, you feel like you didn't do anything. You are back to square one. So we didn't want to do that. We want to make sure that you get ample time. When we cover a topic, we cover in depth. We do the lab, and then you get the whole week to practice it, to check the solution file, to check the recording as many times as you want, to ask the questions, and become very comfortable with that topic before we move on to the next topic. So that's a very successful technique that we have been using, and it has been improving the knowledge and the confidence of students significantly. Of course, my support will be there throughout the duration. So any questions you have, you can ask me on the Facebook group or the comment section of the recordings, and I will answer you as soon as possible. And of course, within the live Zoom session, at the end, we always have a quick Q&A as well. Although the Q&A within the Zoom session is limited to smaller questions, because if you have a detailed question where you need to show me the configuration and ask me the question, the Facebook group is a better place for that. And we have multiple labs, and these PDF will be provided to you along with the solution, and you have the lifetime access. So all these things make this program very unique. And the only program that you would need, you don't need to actually go to multiple sources anymore. If you are thinking CCNA, and if you have joined this program, you have come to the right place. We'll make sure that you become very, very comfortable and an expert in CCNA, right? So just to wind it up about myself a little bit, my name is Arpit Pandit, and I have two CCIs, one in routing and switching, and one in service provider. So you will see that after CCNA, you can go for the professional certification, CCNP. Then you can go for CCI, the Cisco Certified Internet Expert, which is an 8 hours completely practical exam. You need to travel to the Cisco lab location, and you have to configure many challenging scenarios. So this is a very, very interesting exam. And I was very, very interested into routing and switching, of course. And this CCNA that we are doing now, it is actually the routing and switching part, which I am an expert of. And I also was very interested into service provider technology like MPLS and all the VPN technologies. So I did my CCI in service provider as well. I have more than 16 years of training experience. Actually, now it is 18 years. So I did my CCNA back in 2008, and then CCNP in 2009. And then after that, my CCIs I did in 2012 and 14, respectively. And since 2012, I have been training CCI a lot. So I have a very detailed understanding of how Cisco technologies work. But apart from this, I have been also working as a consultant for many organizations, especially service providers. So basically, they ask me some certain challenges or issues they're having in their network, and I provide them some consultancy. So I don't work full time with them, but I know exactly what is the latest technologies they're using and what challenges they are facing. So I can also include this information in our trainings, which can help you to understand the real life scenarios as well. And of course, although it sounds like a cliche, and it is a cliche, but training is my passion, me and Christian both. So nothing makes us more happy than we see people successing in their career, going to the next level, passing their certifications, and just understanding the technology, right? So once you understand something, you become more confident, you feel happier with that technology, and we feel also happy that you have achieved your goal. That is something you would like to do. So, having said that, let's get started. Thank you, guys. And that's all I wanted to cover today. Today, we have a smaller session just because we wanted to discuss the course structure. So, from next week onward, we are going to start with the first topic, which is the networking basics.